It's time for another low budget binge. I also wanted to throw this out there to you guys. I see a lot of YouTube channels where it shows the face of the reviewer making some kind of goofy ass look of big smile or a frowny face or covering their mouth. It's almost like everybody has to act like they're a human emoji on their title cards. Is it me or does that seem cheesy as hell? I just don't see myself ever really doing that. It just feels ingenuine. It's just not for me. Maybe one day I'll do some kind of ironic or snarky take on that, but don't go expecting to see both hands on the side of my face with a look like I just sharded myself or something. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, let's check out this crop of indie horrors. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Bad Ben 7: The Haunted Highway is available streaming on Tubi and from the Bad Ben website. It's directed and written by Nigel Bach. Tom Riley, played by writer-director Nigel Bach, has a new job as a rideshare driver, and wouldn't you know it, his first night on his job is Halloween night. Before the night is over, Tom will run into all sorts of supernatural beings and will eventually end up at a very familiar house on Steelmanville Road. This seventh installment of the Bad Ben series is a mixed bag. I like it that Bach has decided to try something new and shifted the horrors from the home to the car, all decked out with surveillance equipment, of course, and showing each ride from all angles. Tom even gets high-tech and incorporates a drone camera in this one, though as usual it's done in as lo-fi a way as possible, which has been the mantra of this series from day one. The fact that Riley is faced with all sorts of evil on the road is enough of a shakeup to keep things interesting. Tom also faces things other than just ghosts and demons like werewolves, vampires, and other weirdos. All of this broadens the universe Bach has whittled together for very little money. I also can't deny the absolutely lovable presence of Mr. Bach himself. He's less monotone and seems to be getting much more confident in front of the camera. He's no Brando, but he does a good job of carrying the movie on his own reactions to the craziness alone. Bach definitely has an everyman quality that's hard to deny and hard to dislike. Still, this film is extremely repetitious and requires Riley to make the same mistakes over and over again in order for the film to go on. Some scenes go on way too long, others test all common sense as Riley discovers a pair of shoes making their way up the stairs every time he opens the door to the basement, yet continues to open and close the doors, knowing the shoes will be closer to the top of the stairs every time. Tom is repeatedly directed to go to the house on Steelmanville Road, but doesn't really question it, accepting numerous rides to go there despite the fact that he has had such a horrible history with the house. This makes Riley more of a joke or a bumbling buffoon than anything else. I like the way this film continues to reference its own lore. There's a callback to the Mandela Effect, as well as the Crescent Moon Clown, and other films in the series. It's impressive not only that Riley has made so many of these films, but he's managed to keep the story straight from day one. Not many films can say that. I'm also still impressed that the house on Steelmanville Road is actually Riley's real home, and he incorporates it into every movie. And again, additional rudimentary CG effects are added which only amp up the cheesy fun. It's impossible to hate this series as it feels like a celebration of the horror genre from a guy who is willing to put his house and bumbling persona on display in every film. I didn't laugh or jump as much with The Haunted Highway as I did in previous entries, but the change in locale was appreciated, and I find myself looking forward to every new entry as it always promises something new and worth watching. Next week, we catch up to 2021, and that means it's Bad Ben 8, Pandemic. Can't wait. Heckle is new on demand and digital download from Uncorked Entertainment. It's directed by Martin Pick and written by Ariel Anthony Hales. Guy Combs plays Joe Johnson, a popular comedian set to play an even bigger comedian in a new film about the life and death of Ray Kelly, played in flashback by Steve Guttenberg. One night, towards the end of the show, Johnson is heckled by a person in the crowd, ending with the unseen heckler threatening the comedian's life. Soon after, Johnson begins getting menacing phone calls full of threats, causing his paranoia to escalate. When Johnson decides to go on a weekend getaway with his friends to get away from it all, that's what getaways are for, the heckler arrives and the bodies start piling up, ending with a confrontation between Johnson and his heckler. Heckle commits the biggest sin when making a movie about comedy. It just isn't funny. One would think that if you make a movie centering on a stand-up comedian, the script would make an attempt at having a strong sense of humor. Yes, this film shows the cliched, ugly side of comedy, where all of the comedians are miserable alcoholics, abusing everyone around them, and one bad night away from offing himself. There are plenty of fine films depicting all of that, and what Heckle has to say about the comedy has been told much more successfully in much better films. There is a large chunk of the film that lands with a comedic plop because the jokes just aren't there to play off of the serious subject matter going on when off stage. It doesn't help that Heckle isn't the most original when it comes to being a slasher film. The clown-masked killer attempts to be distinct by attempting a whispering laugh, but in actuality, it's not unlike Jason's famous kill, 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 ma, ma, ma mantra. There is a nice bit of brutality to the kills, but they are extremely random. There's no real reason for the killer to be murdering Johnson's friends. They're not really nice people, but they really don't deserve to be pulverized in such a manner. The main issue I had with Heckle is that the lead, Guy Combs, displays not one likable quality. I think he's going for a Russell Brand vibe here as a cynical rock star comedian, but it just comes off as a bad parody, kind of like an SNL actor playing Russell Brand badly. Yes, the audience gets their chance to see some comeuppance to the jerk, but with the cast that really isn't likable either, it really makes for a miserable experience all around. Then, of course, there's the Guttenberg. Steve Guttenberg's got a kind of a Bob Saget style to him that really sells that light-hearted comedian with a dark side successfully. If there's a highlight to Heckle, it's his performance, as he does feel like the only person trying to play some kind of character with some depth here. Still, he's an abusive drunk sad sack, but he's the most interesting sad sack of the bunch. The ending is pretty ridiculous, where the killer's elaborate plan spans decades, all culminating in one night of carnage. The unmasking is lackluster because Johnson doesn't know who the hell it is, and neither does the viewer until after a lengthy flashback explaining it all, half of which we've already seen in the opener. Heckle doesn't really say anything new, it isn't funny, and it feels full of misery. It just didn't work for me, despite the fact that it's good to see the Guttenberg again. The Last Possession is new on demand, digital download, and streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Dan Riddle and written by Greg Schuss. When the Peroni family moves back into the childhood home of husband Kent, played by Stephen Brody, they begin experiencing strange phenomena, all occurring after his grandfather, played by Tom Proctor, kills himself and a mysterious sinkhole opens up in the backyard. As the strange encounters escalate, the family begins to realize something that cannot be explained is going on. While there's nothing particularly wrong with it, The Last Possession's biggest flaw is that it's altogether your typical haunted house movie. There's the happy new family moving in, the house with a secret, the kids screaming about moving shadows and objects in the middle of the night, the nightmares, the escalation of paranormal activity, and so on. The film follows the Poltergeist format from beginning to end without much deviation. While it doesn't get many points for originality, it does go through the motions of a haunted house film pretty well. The acting is above par for this type of film. The scares work with some decent lead-ins that build tension to the occasional jump scare or disturbing image. Everything is done almost as if it were following a textbook on how to make a haunted house movie. Turns out there's a twist in the end, but I feel it occurs almost too late in the game to factor in to make The Last Possession feel distinct. I like the twist. I won't reveal it. It does make this particular haunting different than most. I think had there been more hints as to what was going on and what the nature of the disturbance was, the film might have made more of an impact on me. The last-minute reveal is a whopper and changes the whole perspective of the movie, but comes in way too late in the game. If you're looking for a capable haunted house film, there are definitely worse ones out there than The Last Possession. Stick with it till the end for the best part, but I doubt most will do so because everything feels extremely familiar leading up to it. The Exorcism of God is new on-demand and digital download from Saban Films. It's directed by Alejandro Hidalgo and written by Alejandro Hidalgo and Santiago Fernandez Calvete. In 2003, Father Peter Williams, played by Will Beinbrink, messed up an exorcism big time. Despite the large amount of goo and pus on the possessed woman, he ended up being mesmerized by her during an exorcism and had sex with her. This seemingly worked in releasing the demons, so to speak, but this act has cursed the priest ever since. Now in present day, Father Williams is looked at as a saint in the orphanage he works at. But when an inmate from an asylum claims to be possessed by the same demon, Father Williams is forced to face his past and dispel the demon once and for all. Possession movies have a lot going against them. The process was well documented in the original The Exorcist, and ever since, anyone attempting to do a film about Catholic exorcism is forced to follow the same steps, which basically seem like the new film is simply knocking off the old. That said, The Exorcism of God really doesn't do itself any favors at making itself distinct by recreating specific scenes from The Exorcist, such as the street lamp arrival in the first moments. I get it, it's an homage. But if you're trying to establish a movie that stands on its own, you don't start by ripping off the king of possession films. It's a bad look. Thankfully, The Exorcism of God recovers from that early foul by veering into very controversial directions. Yes, we've seen the story of a priest who has made mistakes in the past, but man, sleeping with the person you're supposed to be saving is a big one. This immediately complicates things greatly, and while I wouldn't say Will Beinbrink knocks the role out of the park, he certainly does a decent job of making his role as Father Williams distinct. Yes, the concept is quite icky, but if you're looking for a sin to commit, the original one is as big as it gets. So I quite like the twist this film tosses our way. The film itself has a number of solid scare scenes incorporating some very scary practical possession appliances. This is done with a nice mix of skewed angles, intense scenes of build-up, and genuinely scary effects as the punchline. The possessed in this film really do end up looking frighteningly potent. I've seen my fair share of possession films, but this one really delivers the goods in terms of the way the possessed look. There's a statue of Mary that grows hideous, bulbous eyes and comes to life, as well as the statue of Jesus that is the stuff of nightmares. There are also some simple scenes of night terror that work marvelously. The filmmakers managed to pepper these scenes evenly through the film, which kept me on my toes the entire time. While the film veers from the possession movie blueprint after the opening moments, it heads right back on course into familiar territory into the last act. Yes, while the film takes the final moments a step farther, it still is all about sacrificing one soul for another. I get it. The soul is always the bartering chip for these films, but again, there has to be some way of making the final moments different from what has come before. And while it may be different than the final scene of The Exorcist, I've seen the last scene of The Exorcism of God before in many, many possession films that have come before it. So The Exorcism of God is a mixed bag. If you don't mind the familiar beginnings and endings, you're going to find the middle section of the film to be quite refreshing and downright terrifying. It's got a smaller part for Joseph Marcel as another priest who advises Father Williams. You'll recognize him as Joffrey, or Jeeves the butler from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and find yourself wondering where the hell he's been and why he's chosen this movie to make an appearance. There are definitely far worse possession films out there, but The Exorcism of God fails to escape the trappings of the best exorcism film of all time. Audition, aka Audition, found footage film, is new streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Eric Huff and Joshua Paul, and written by Eric Huff. David, played by unseen cameraman and co-director and writer Eric Huff, is making a reality show in feature-length form, and convinces aspiring actresses to audition for a lead role, promising to make them a star. To get to know the actresses, he follows them around on their regular day-to-day activities. But what these actresses don't know is that David is a murderer, luring each victim into his trap. The footage that makes up this movie was found in an abandoned warehouse filled with mannequins, according to the opening scrawl. Not to be mistaken for Takashi Miike's Audition, Audition, also known as Audition found footage film, is, you guessed it, a found footage film. The entire movie is done handheld, with David holding the camera focusing on these young actresses at various stages in the audition process. What the film does well is really make the whole story feel immediate. We know from the beginning that David is going to kill these girls, but still, given the likability of them, I found myself holding out hope that one of them, specifically Alexandra Dreyfus, who plays Lacey Lee, which the film spends most of its time following, will somehow avoid the fate of the other girls. That's the compelling factor that kept me watching. Dreyfus is a natural beauty, and despite the shaky cam, she eats up the lens every time it focuses on her. She's likable, she's got sass and personality, and she's easy on the eyes. Even David himself seems to be falling for her, despite the fact that he's planning on killing her eventually. The film does a good job of keeping its ending questionable all the way through, even though it tells you how the story ends in the opening moments. Will David let Lacey Lee go? Will she fight him off and escape? Will David kill her like it seems he's killed the rest of the girls? That's the question that made me stay until the end. But it's a long time until this one is over. There are snippets of other girls' auditions peppered through, some of them before David has shown his psychotic hand. Other clips show how much of a stalker David is, toying with his prey. Others pull the curtain back and just show how inhuman David is and the horror he inflicts on them once he lets them know that there really is no movie. Still, most of the film is focused on Lacey Lee, and I kind of wish there would have been more time spent on the other girls to counter the rather innocent getting to know you parts of Lacey Lee's audition. Once we get to the climax where Lacey Lee faces the real David, it's extremely well done. The use of mannequins and the creepy locked warehouse is something out of any woman's worst nightmare. I have to give it to this film for really saving the big scares for the final moments. It shows a lot of patience on the filmmaker's part, but I feel that some viewers might be itching for more of an even distribution of scares throughout Audition. One thing that almost killed Audition for me was the use of a soundtrack and score. To me, a found footage film is best when it feels like no hands have touched the tape. This means no score to build tension. Nothing tells me that the found footage film lacks confidence in itself more than the appearance of a musical score to hold the hand of the audience and let them know exactly when to be scared. It's a cheat and an insult to the intelligence of the audience. I just can't get behind it, even if David might have edited this footage together himself and cut sound to it. Adding a score just takes away from what could have been a raw, relentless film. Instead, the fact that so much post-production was performed on Audition with multiple edits, inserted clips of odd random things, and of course the invasive score, a truly harrowing found footage film was diminished into an okay one.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. You're doomed. Live the life that you are meant to be. Live inside that reality.